The rich man's son wanted to find the donor who had saved his life. And when he finally did, tears rolled down his cheeks. But before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Ethan stepped outside and took a deep breath, as if tasting fresh air for the first time. His eyes turned to the blue sky, where the treetops faded into the azure like green waves. Above him, a flock of birds danced freely in the air. Most people had long stopped noticing such beauty in the rush of daily life, but for Ethan, the world now shone differently. Life, which had been hanging by a thread not long ago, had taken on new meaning. He had spent 3 long months behind hospital walls, where every day was filled with pain and fear. All because of one reckless mistake. That ill-fated weekend, he and his friends were racing their motorcycles down a road outside the city. One wrong turn changed everything. Ethan was thrown from the bike and blacked out. He woke up in a hospital bed, only to learn he had been inches from death. Massive blood loss had nearly claimed his life. Only a miracle, an emergency blood transfusion, could save him. Time was slipping away like sand. Every minute mattered. For the doctors, it was another race against death. But Ethan had an extremely rare blood type, AB negative. Finding a matching donor in that small hospital was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And yet, fate showed mercy. A single donor was found, almost like a divine intervention, and Ethan survived. As soon as he began to regain his strength, his parents moved him to a luxurious clinic in the heart of the city. Elizabeth and Robert Sterling, Ethan's parents, were people whom life had treated generously. A thriving business, a lavish home, and even a staff of personal servants, all of it made others envious. Some whispered that this jealousy was like a curse, bringing misfortune to their family and nearly costing them their only son, 23-year-old Ethan. "Ethan, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" his parents kept asking the moment he began to recover. "Mom, Dad, I'm fine. Nothing hurts anymore, just a little dizziness, but it's fading. I'm just so grateful to be alive," Ethan replied sincerely, bringing tears to their eyes. He was already making plans for the future. But first on his list was meeting the person who had saved him. Who was he? What did he do? What kind of life did he have? These questions wouldn't leave Ethan's mind. He truly wanted to thank the person who had given him a second chance. "Mom, how can I find out the address of my donor? I really want to meet them," Ethan asked. Elizabeth hesitated, something that surprised her son. "But Ethan, you know it's not that simple. And besides, times are hard for everyone. They probably don't have time for thank yous right now." "Mom, what are you talking about? I've made up my mind. I want to tell this person about myself and thank them properly. I owe them my life." There wasn't a trace of doubt in Ethan's voice. Elizabeth had no choice but to agree. It wasn't easy to get the address, such information is usually protected by law. But Ethan's persistence, along with his father's influence, eventually persuaded one of the doctors to reveal it, at great personal risk. The man who had saved Ethan was a local schoolteacher named David Miller, a kind, well-respected man, loved by his colleagues and students alike. Sadly, he had recently died in a car accident after losing control on a rain-slick road. Doctors weren't able to save him. David Miller was the kind of person people called a man with a heart of gold. Always willing to help others, he had registered at the blood bank knowing his rare blood type could be life-saving. "Someone might need it," he said. "And I'll be there if they do." Ethan was deeply saddened to hear of David's passing. But that didn't stop him. He felt connected to this teacher's story and wanted to thank his family in person. Without hesitation, he set out for David's hometown, the same place where the tragic accident had happened. Springfield, a quiet and well-kept town, greeted Ethan with warm sunshine, blooming flower beds, and friendly smiles from passers-by. It was a stark contrast to the big city, where people barely noticed each other in the daily rush through crowded streets and packed subways. Following the address, Ethan soon arrived at an old 5-story apartment building. Within minutes, he was pressing the doorbell. No answer. He rang again. And again. What do you want? Can't you see no one's home? Step away from the door, a grumpy elderly woman called out from the apartment across the hall. Hello, ma'am. I know David Miller's relatives live here. I really need to speak with them, Ethan replied, caught a bit off guard. The neighbor gave him a suspicious look and, with the same annoyed tone, asked. And who are you to them? Me? Ethan hesitated, unsure what to say. A family friend. Listen, young man. You'd better leave while you still can. I told you, there's no one here. Margaret was rushed to the hospital the moment she heard about David's death. No one else lives here anymore. Which hospital? Please, it's very important, Ethan called out as the neighbor began to shut her door. Central City Hospital. Go figure it out from there. It turned out to be much harder than Ethan had expected. But that didn't stop him. He found the hospital and even managed to learn which room Margaret was in. Then came the long wait, over 2 hours sitting in the hospital lobby, counting the minutes until visiting hours finally began. 100 thoughts swirled through his mind. What should I say? How will she react? Will she even want to talk to me? Or throw me out? When the clock struck 4, Ethan joined the crowd heading up the stairs. He gently pushed open the door to the hospital room and saw an elderly woman sitting silently on the bed, staring blankly out the window. She didn't even glance toward the door. Judging by her age and her sadness, Ethan guessed she was David's mother. He hadn't caught her last name during the exchange with the neighbor, so he simply called her by her first name. Margaret? Hello. May I speak with you for a moment? Slowly, the woman turned her head. Her face was aged, her eyes sunken and full of sorrow. She looked at him with indifference, saying nothing. Ethan took a deep breath and continued. My name is Ethan. I'm the person your son, David Miller, saved. His blood was used for my transfusion. Thanks to him, I'm alive. Suddenly, Margaret's eyes flashed with anger, and she snapped. And what do I care about that? David is gone. My life ended with his. I couldn't even bury him properly because of his damn foolishness. He left a will asking to be cremated, said he wanted to help people, like some lunatic. And who helped him, huh? Who? Just go. I don't want to see you. She turned away deliberately and fixed her gaze back on the window. Ethan had imagined many possible outcomes for this meeting, but not this. This was something else, cold, bitter, cruel. Still, there was nothing he could do. He had to leave and accept the pain. Just as he stepped out into the hallway, the door behind him swung open and a beautiful young woman appeared. Hi there. Were you just visiting my grandmother? She asked. Yes, but I'm leaving now, Ethan replied quietly. Grace. Where have you been? It's time for my medication, and I couldn't find you anywhere, Margaret called from inside. I'm coming, Grandma, the girl answered. Ethan sank into a chair in the hallway, disheartened. Mom was right. I never should have come here, he thought. Suddenly, the door opened again and the same girl stepped out. Wait. Please, don't go, she called after him. I'm sorry about my grandmother. She's always been strict and demanding. But after my dad died, she hasn't been the same. She's been through a lot, and it's hardened her. What's your name? Ethan, he answered. He told Grace why he had come. Really? That's amazing. I'm so glad you're okay. You're kind of like family to us now. And don't worry, Grandma will come around. She'll want to talk to you again, you'll see, Grace said, smiling warmly. In that moment, Ethan realized he was completely captivated by her, those large blue eyes, full of life and kindness, had him mesmerized. Let's drop the formalities. Want to grab lunch together? Is there a good cafe nearby? Yes. Sure, let's drop the formalities, Grace laughed. There's a cozy little cafe just around the corner. The food's great. She happily accepted Ethan's offer. They had a wonderful time together. Grace told Ethan about her father, David Miller. He had raised her with her grandmother after her mother passed away when Grace was just a little girl. She spoke of her dad with warmth, her words full of love and nostalgia. She showed Ethan some photos on her phone. These are always with me, in my memory and in my heart, she said softly. Then she added, you know, you have my father's blood in you. And now it feels like he's still close, right beside me. Like I could just reach out and touch him. Grace told him she worked as a florist in a small flower shop, and that it was her love for the job that helped her survive the unbearable pain of losing her father. The day was drawing to a close, and Ethan had a ticket for an evening train. But something inside him didn't want to go. He felt an overwhelming need to see Grace every day, to hear her voice, to simply be near her. What he didn't know was that Grace felt the same. Later, they would both call it love. Can I come see you again? Ethan asked, his voice full of hope. Of course you can. Grace replied without hesitation. Ethan returned home in high spirits and shared his joy with his parents. But to his shock, they didn't share his excitement about Grace. Son, maybe you should think this through, his father said cautiously. Why rush into something with the first girl you meet? You know first impressions can be deceiving. Why not look around? There are plenty of smart, well-educated girls among our business partners' daughters. Any one of them would be a perfect match for you, Elizabeth chimed in. Ethan was stunned. Are you serious? Grace isn't just some random girl. And, Mom, I will never marry someone just because she's the daughter of one of your partners. I love you both, but if you try to keep me away from Grace, I'll move out. Don't you dare give me ultimatums. Robert snapped. You've achieved nothing yet to speak to me like that. Ethan was so shaken by their reaction, he couldn't find the words to respond. He just turned and walked out. That night, neither parent could sleep. My God, what mess has Ethan gotten himself into? Robert sighed. I told you we shouldn't have let him go there. I knew it wouldn't end well. But now what do we do? Elizabeth asked bitterly. We'll have to tell him the truth about where he came from. We should have done it long ago, but now, we have no choice, Robert said quietly. The next morning, they found a note from Ethan on the living room table. Gone for the weekend. I'll be back by Monday. He couldn't stay away from Grace. Every day without her felt like a lifetime. He counted down the hours until the weekend, and the argument with his parents seemed more absurd with each passing moment. Why had they been so harsh about Grace? After all, they were the kind of wealthy people who never flaunted their money or status. And now this. Why her? Look at the daughters of our business partners. It was ridiculous. Ethan had made a promise to himself years ago, he would marry the one who truly captured his heart. And now, it had happened. That very day, he decided to propose to Grace. He didn't care what his parents thought. If they were against it, he would move out and get his own place. His salary wasn't huge yet, but as a programmer, he had great career prospects and strong financial potential. 2 hours flew by while he was lost in thought, 2 hours that separated him from the one he loved. Grace, he called out the moment he saw her on the train platform. How are you, sweetheart? I missed you so much. I'm okay, love. I missed you too, so much. Their kisses and tight embrace seemed to last forever. When Ethan noticed people watching them, he laughed softly. Let's go back to that little cafe we went to on our first day. I've got a surprise for you. They sat in their favorite spot, bathed in the warm glow from the windows, the smell of fresh coffee wrapping around them like a cozy blanket. They browsed the well-worn menu, pretending to decide what to order, but Ethan's thoughts were far from drinks. His heart was racing. He knew this moment would change their lives. Suddenly, an idea came to him, so simple and pure, it felt like a star lighting up in his chest. "Grace," he said softly, his voice trembling, "let's write a vow. Right here, on this old menu. A promise to always love each other, no matter what. We'll keep it in our hearts, even when we're 30, 50, or 90. Will you do it with me?" Grace looked at him, her big blue eyes full of tenderness and a flicker of surprise. A warm smile spread across her lips, and she nodded, just barely, but with a sincerity that took Ethan's breath away. They took a pen, and on the corner of the menu, among coffee stains and scribbles from the waitstaff, they wrote the words that would become their vow. "We, Ethan and Grace, vow to love each other forever, through joy and sorrow, in sunshine and in rain." These words, simple but profound, now lived not only on the worn cafe menu but in their hearts, forming an unbreakable bond that connected their souls. But Ethan wasn't done. He felt the moment had come, his heart couldn't stay silent any longer. With trembling hands, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a modest ring, glowing with the love he'd poured into choosing it. "Grace," he whispered, afraid his voice might crack, "there's one more thing. Will you marry me? I want you by my side forever." Time seemed to stand still. Grace looked at the ring, then at Ethan. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of happiness so overwhelming it barely fit inside her heart. It felt as if the whole world had gone silent just to witness this moment, their eyes, their breath, their love. "Yes, Ethan." "Of course, yes," she breathed, her voice ringing like a bell full of joy. Ethan felt the weight fall from his shoulders, and his soul lifted skyward. He felt like a child receiving the one gift he'd always dreamed of. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they both burst into laughter, holding each other tight, oblivious to the curious looks of cafe patrons. That day became their little miracle, the day love conquered every doubt. But the surprises didn't end there. Beaming, Grace said, "Ethan, I have a surprise for you too. Come home with me. Grandma invited you for dinner." Ethan froze, hardly believing his ears. "Margaret? But, she didn't even want to see me. She kicked me out of the hospital," he said, caught between disbelief and amazement. Grace smiled, a warm, soft smile that could melt any frost. "Grandma sees right through people. She saw how happy I am with you, how my eyes light up when I talk about you. And she realized, you're a good man, Ethan. She wants to meet you properly." Ethan was stunned. He remembered Margaret's cold, cutting words, her pain-laced glare in the hospital. But things had changed. They went to Grace's home, and there, in that small, cozy apartment, Ethan saw a different Margaret. Her once sorrowful eyes now glowed with kindness. She didn't look at him like a stranger anymore, but like someone who had brought light into her granddaughter's life. During dinner, she even smiled, sharing stories from Grace's childhood. Ethan felt a quiet warmth blossom in his chest. It was a small, but meaningful victory, not just winning Grace's heart, but melting the ice around her grandmother's. The weekend passed like a bright, fleeting dream. Soon, they were back on the platform. A cold wind whipped around them as the train prepared to carry Ethan back to his city. Their hands were tightly clasped, neither wanted to let go. "Don't be sad, Grace," Ethan said with a brave smile, though his throat was tight. "The work week will fly by, and I'll be back before you know it. I promise." Grace nodded, but her eyes sparkled with tears. She watched the train disappear into the distance. Her heart twisted with a strange fear. The happiness she felt, so vast, so radiant, scared her. She worried that if she dared to say, "I'm happy," out loud, it might shatter like a glass star. It all felt too beautiful to last. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the train car, staring out the window. Trees and fields raced by, but all he could see was her face, her smile, her eyes, her tenderness. He, too, was afraid that their happiness was too fragile to hold. But deep down, he knew, their love, their vow scribbled on an old menu, their promises, was stronger than fear. And as long as they held on to each other, that love would keep them warm, like a beacon in the cold night. As soon as Ethan stepped through the front door at home, his mother called out to him. "Ethan, your father and I need to talk to you. It's serious." Here we go, Ethan thought. This sounds bad. Usually, he listened to his parents, but not this time. "Ethan, sweetheart, please hear us out. Just don't interrupt right away. We're sorry, but you'll have to break things off with Grace, even if you're fond of her," Elizabeth said quietly. Robert nodded in agreement. "Fond of her? I love her. I asked Grace to marry me today." Ethan's voice trembled with fury. "Son, we're sorry, but this has gone too far," Robert snapped. "I'm going to pack my things. I'll move into a rented apartment. If you change your mind about Grace, call me, we'll talk," Ethan said firmly and walked toward the door. "David Miller, he's your father. Your biological father." The words stopped Ethan in his tracks. He turned back, stunned, staring at his parents in disbelief. They had called him their son his whole life. He had always called them Mom and Dad. How could this be anything else? What? David Miller, my donor, he's my father. And Grace, his daughter, is my sister. Yes, it's true. Grace is your sister, Elizabeth said quietly. Ethan dropped onto the couch, burying his head in his hands. He didn't want to, believe it. "No. I don't want this. I can't accept it," he said, his voice shaking with helplessness. "It's like someone ripped the life out of me. Without Grace, life is just existence. I know, sweetheart, it's hard to believe. But here, look at these old photographs," Elizabeth said, handing him a small bundle. Ethan looked through the time-worn photos, and the truth began to settle in. Harsh, cruel, but real. One of the photos showed the same man he had seen in Grace's phone at the cafe, David Miller. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "To my beloved Mary, for a long memory." Another picture showed his mother and David standing in front of a fountain. Wait, he knew that fountain. It was across the street from the cafe where he and Grace had spent so many happy moments. "But how is this even possible, Dad?" Ethan asked, still unable to call him anything else. "That all happened before your mother met me. She'll explain," Robert replied. Elizabeth nervously wrung her hands. It was obvious how difficult this was for her. "I met David when we were in college. We were in the same group, friends at first. I wasn't sure if I wanted something serious, but David was sweet and persistent, and eventually I gave in. We lived in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town. David asked me to marry him, but I wasn't ready. We agreed to wait until we could afford a place of our own. And then Robert came into my life. The man you know as your father. He was visiting our town for work. We met by chance in a cafe, and fell in love instantly. It was unreal. Love at first sight." At that, Robert smiled. Even after all these years, he remembered it vividly, the beautiful blonde girl sitting alone, waiting for her coffee. She had captured his heart the moment he saw her. What happened next felt like a fairy tale. Their love was so strong, nothing seemed able to stand in its way. Elizabeth sighed heavily and continued. "I told David I was leaving him. It was awful, but I didn't think it could get worse. Then, as I was packing my things that final day, I realized I was pregnant, almost 2 months along. I had suspected it earlier, but hoped it was just stress or fatigue. At the time of conception, I hadn't even met Robert yet. We made the decision together, to get married right away and have Robert listed as the father. I never told David. That's the truth, son. And now, all these years later, it's come back to us. Elizabeth was shaking. She had never imagined she'd one day have to tell her son this story. And along with the guilt came a deep, painful shame, for what she had done to David. She had taken his child from him. And he, without ever knowing, had saved his own son's life. Ethan was crushed. His mind accepted the facts, but his heart was screaming no. It was still full of love for Grace. Midnight had long passed, and Ethan still hadn't closed his eyes. It felt like there would never be sleep again, never be joy, never be love, nothing at all. Just before dawn, he finally drifted into a fitful sleep. And yet, that short dream was the brightest he'd ever had. Grace was there. They were holding hands. For a moment, their hands slipped apart, then found each other again. And he heard her voice, soft and full of love. "Everything will be okay, my love." He woke with a light heart. The despair was gone. Without hesitation, he decided to go to her. He couldn't wait for the weekend. His parents were stunned when they saw him. But instead of a bitter, angry look, they saw something different in his eyes: kindness, peace, resolve. "I need to see Grace. I hope you understand." Elizabeth and Robert simply nodded. The whole train ride, as it rushed through endless fields and forests, Ethan couldn't sit still. His heart, like a caged bird, thudded against the walls of anxious thought. How could he tell Grace the truth that had hit him like a landslide? How could he put into words the cruel reality he himself could barely grasp? Just yesterday, their love had seemed unshakable, a star shining brightly in the night sky. But now, that star trembled, on the verge of falling into a dark, bottomless void. The dream where he and Grace walked hand in hand under a gentle sun now felt like a fragile mirage. And even though Grace had sounded so joyful on the phone when he told her he was coming, her voice light and bright like a spring stream, it only added weight to the truth he carried. Grace, unaware of the storm inside him, waited eagerly, just like always. She ran to the platform, her steps light as air, her eyes glowing with the same sincere love that once made Ethan's heart race. She stood there in a flowing dress that danced in the breeze, her smile cutting through his clouded thoughts like a sunbeam. "Ethan, my love, my one and only," Grace thought, spotting him stepping off the train. He embraced her with the same warmth as always, like holding on to life itself. His smile was still there, playful and familiar, but Grace, always sensitive to his inner world, caught something different. A shadow behind his eyes, faint but deep, like a crack in delicate glass. That subtle sadness stung her heart. "How about a cup of coffee at our place?" she asked, trying to hide her worry behind a soft smile. Her voice trembled, sensing the storm. "Yes, of course, Grace," Ethan replied quietly. He knew it was time. There was no putting it off, just as you can't stop a rock once it begins to fall. They walked toward the cafe where they had once first opened their hearts to each other. But every step felt heavy, as if he were carrying the weight of a shattered destiny on his shoulders. Ethan gathered his courage. His voice, usually firm and steady, was shaky as he began. He told her everything. How his world had collapsed overnight. What his parents had revealed. That David Miller, the man whose blood had saved him, was in fact his real father. He spoke, his eyes brimming with emotion, fear, grief, confusion, heartbreak. He braced himself for her to turn away, to be horrified, to fall silent in shock. He feared their love, so fragile now, would collapse under the weight of the truth, like a house of cards in a storm. But instead, Grace smiled, gently, radiantly. Her eyes, clear and deep like mountain lakes, gazed at him with such tenderness that Ethan forgot how to breathe. "Grace, how can you smile?" he whispered, stunned. "Aren't you upset?" She laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes in a breeze, banishing the darkness in his soul. "Why do you think I'm your sister, Ethan?" she said, her voice calm and warm. "Your parents left town and never looked back. They assumed. But they were wrong. My mom was married twice. I was born from her first marriage. David Miller was her second husband. He adopted me when I was very little. He became my father, my true family, especially after my mother passed. But we don't share any blood, Ethan. We're not biologically related." Ethan froze. His heart, gripped just moments ago by icy fear, began to thaw. "You mean, really? You're not my sister?" he asked, barely daring to believe fate could be so kind. "No, I'm not," Grace said, her smile blooming even brighter. "I'm your fiancé." And in that moment, the world that had fallen apart began to rebuild itself. Each word she spoke, each glance, was like a thread stitching together the torn fabric of his life. They sat in their café, holding hands, and time seemed to pause, granting them space to breathe in this new hope. Their love, tested by fire, was now stronger, like tempered steel. Not long after, Ethan and Grace began their journey together, hand in hand. What their future would look like depended entirely on them. But deep down, they both knew, this love that had bound them was stronger than any storm. It was their lighthouse, their compass, their unshakable fortress. And as long as they held on to one another, love through every obstacle, happiness would walk beside them, faithfully, always. The moment the train pulled into Ethan's hometown station, he felt a wave of lightness rush through him, as if a warm wind had swept away all his worries. He couldn't wait another second to share the joy bursting in his heart. Grabbing his phone, he dialed Elizabeth's number, his voice shook, but this time it was from pure happiness. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe it, Grace isn't my sister," he blurted out the second he heard his mother's voice. "She told me everything. Her mom was married twice. David Miller, my donor, adopted her. We're not related. I'm so happy, you have no idea." There was silence on the other end, but Ethan could feel the relief and joy radiating even through the pause. Elizabeth, whose voice was usually calm and composed, now trembled with emotion. "Sweetheart, is it true? Oh, Ethan, we're so happy for you. Bring Grace home, we want to meet her, we want to hug you both." Robert took the phone and added warmly. "Ethan, son, you've made us the happiest parents in the world. Bring your Grace. We'll be waiting." A few days later, Ethan and Grace arrived together in his hometown. Grace, a little shy, stepped into the house where she was welcomed not as a guest, but as part of the family. Elizabeth, usually reserved and proper, wrapped her in a hug so tight, Grace felt her cheeks flush with warmth. Smiling, Robert shook Ethan's hand and whispered, "You found a real treasure, son." That evening, over a table filled with laughter and stories, Grace shared about her life, her flower shop, her grandmother Margaret, who now fully supported their relationship. Ethan's parents listened intently, their eyes reflecting deep relief and gratitude that everything had turned out so beautifully. A year passed, one full of love, little joys, and big dreams. Ethan and Grace were married in a cozy church on the edge of town, surrounded by blooming gardens and birdsong, as if nature itself had come to celebrate. Grace, glowing in a white dress like morning light, held Ethan's hand. And as he looked at her, he felt a fullness in his heart he'd never known before. Their vow, once scribbled on a worn-out cafe menu, now echoed in their promises at the altar. Every guest, from Margaret to Ethan's closest friends, was moved to tears of joy. A few months after the wedding, Ethan and Grace returned to the small town of Springfield, where everything had begun. They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets until they reached the modest grave of David Miller, the man whose blood had saved Ethan's life and whose story had unknowingly connected them. They brought a bouquet of white lilies, Grace's favorite flowers, chosen from her own shop. Laying them gently on the grave, they stood in silence, their hands tightly clasped. With a lump in his throat, Ethan whispered. "Thank you, David Miller. Thank you for my life. And thank you, for leading me to Grace." Grace wiped away a tear and added softly. "Dad, you'll always be with us. We'll never forget you." Every year on that same day, they returned to his grave, bringing flowers and words of gratitude. Their love, forged through trials, only grew stronger with time. And they both knew, as long as they had each other, no storm could tear them apart. Together, Ethan and Grace built a life filled with warmth,